Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Microsoft Reactor workshop. Before we begin, I would just like to say a quick word about Microsoft Code of Conduct. We all come from a different background, but we are all here to learn. So please be aware of each other and be welcoming and respectful to all points of view. Thank you. In today's session, we are going to be unpacking Microsoft's build. And we are going to be talking about scale cloud-native apps and accelerate app modernization. Today, I have speakers here. I have Korey Stegared-Pace, who is a Microsoft cloud advocate at the Stockholm Reactor. There you are. Wait, where? Now, there you are, Korey. Hi.
Hello.
He's joining from Stockholm. Thank you so much for being here today. Then we have Vivek from India as well, who is also a Microsoft cloud advocate, and he's going to be our moderator today. And then from the UK, we have John Lunn joining us, who is not only just a technical architect, but also Microsoft MVP. I'm going to put myself to the background now, but I'm here if I'm needed. So please, guys, tell our audience a bit more about yourselves, and I hand the word over to you, Vivek.
Hey, thanks, Erika, for the introduction. And I'm Vivek, cloud advocate at Microsoft. And today I have John and Korey with me. And John and Korey, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'll go first if you like. Hi, Vivek, and hi, Korey. Yeah, my name's John Lunn. As was just pointed out, I'm a technical architect working for BT Enterprise over in the UK at the moment. Yeah, very much focused on the Azure platform, kind of generally and holistically, and kind of helping customers understand some of the complexities of moving applications and services into a cloud platform. And yeah, that's what I do as a day job. And it was mentioned that I'm an Azure MVP as well, and it's been a great couple of years with the community doing some fantastic stuff. And yeah, I'm happy to be here with you guys today.
Fantastic. Welcome. And Korey.
Hello. So I'm based in Stockholm. Some people might call me the Vivek of Sweden, but I will not take that honor. But yeah, focused primarily on our events in our reactor space in Stockholm. A huge fan of AI and building great things with AI, which we'll probably talk about some hopefully today because there are some great announcements on Build. But super happy to be here.
Thank you, Korey and John, for being here. And let me start with John. Okay, so so John, we are here discussing about the build announcements, what happened, and understanding all the tech parts and what's coming new, and we are so much of excitement for the new things which are coming in. So what is that exciting stuff do you hear in build, and which of those things if you want to share with us?
Yeah, well, I mean, firstly, they're always kind of exciting events, not just for the tech announcements, but for the networking and the fantastic things that, lots of people are doing in the community at the moment, particularly on that innovation side. And some of the announcements that came from Build, I think there were well over 50 announcements, over the course of that week that were announced as part of Build. And I took the liberty to kind of pick on one or two that kind of caught my eye and kind of got me enthused. But we can start off with things like they've done some really great stuff as of late with the Azure Cognitive Services SDKs and the ability to kind of do a lot of that that kind of stuff in terms of bringing that AI-enabled service into your application. So I know there was a lot of talk around OpenAI, as a service and what they've done with GitHub Copilot and kind of allowing that to pair programmers. So the advances with that were really exciting. Other things like the fact that they've kind of taken Lewis, so that language understanding and intelligence, that service, to the next level now with that kind of, again, part of that cognitive services, umbrella, if you like. That was really cool to see. Another one that kind of really interests me, not that I work in it on a day-to-day basis, but I got a real passion for IoT and all of those kind of cool services that we can kind of hook our sensors and various components within our businesses together. And the fact that I think they've launched a public preview with actually being able to define 3D scenes, as part of your digital twin, that you can kind of map all of your different sensors across your business in that 3D environment, I thought was really, really cool to see. And I'm looking forward to kind of playing with that as well. But, other things generally available, Azure Container Apps, I think has been on in public preview for a little while. And it's cool to see that's now gone GA. Kind of gives us that stepping stone into kind of without the complexities maybe of a full-blown Kubernetes cluster. We can start to run those applications on Azure Container Apps now as well. But yeah, look, I think the only other one that I picked up really is a bit close to my heart with what I do as a day job is they've announced about HCI, a single node for Azure Stack HCI as well, which is really cool to see. And it's going to kind of enable a lot more businesses to take up some of that HCI product stack. Maybe they don't need that business continuity thing. They're happy to run workloads on a single node. So it's great to see that that's now GA as well. But apart from that, yeah, there's obviously the core thing that I think we're going to talk about today around that app modernization piece. I mean, firstly, have you got any questions on any of those bits, Vivek?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one of the things which you told, right, how easy, it is. Azure Container Apps has made it easy, specifically from how it deploys. Whether if I don't know Kubernetes, and still I can able to go and deploy it. And they have made it much more easier by bringing in draft. Basically, if you have draft running and you can just get, just have an app and just run the draft command, and you are able to create Docker file, able to create the manifest files, and even GitHub Action connect with that, right? So you can just directly go and deploy your app into Azure Kubernetes Service, even if you don't have any of those enabled as well. So coming back to your background as well, right? So I did tell you that I am very layman in migrations. I've never done a migration, a full-blown migration. So I just wanted to ask you as well, what are those exciting announcements which came across for the migrations?
Yeah, absolutely. No, obviously, we've had the ability to use a product set called Azure Migrate. It's been around for a little while now in Azure in terms of being able to run assessments across our existing infrastructure. Look at our, maybe we've got Hyper-V clusters, maybe we've got VMware clusters, or we've got some physical servers. We've had Azure Migrate as an appliance-based tool that we can drop into our environment and do that kind of holistic discovery and the initial discovery of our estate, and it brings it to us in a nice portal form that we can kind of understand a bit more detail what those infrastructure servers are actually doing to build up our workloads. Now that's come through an evolution over the years where Microsoft have added a few other additional features to it, things like the ability to before to look at interdependencies between servers. So if we're scanning, we've got half a dozen servers and we're scanning those servers, it was brought in a little while ago that interdependency mappings were then available to us through the portal natively with the Azure Migrate appliance, where we could see which servers were talking to which servers, so we could kind of make a decent decision over, right, what servers and workloads might I need to move at any particular time, what are relational to each other. And I think as part of the build announcement, some of the exciting things that Microsoft have introduced now, and they put into public preview, is now not just the ability to just scan infrastructure servers, so whether that be physical servers or VMs, based on a Hyper-V or VMware cluster, but now the ability to kind of dig into that a little bit and recognize when we may have some web apps. So we may have some .NET web apps running on VMs at the moment. We can identify those. It's in public preview now, and it gives us more information that we can do something with in order to migrate those into native app services into Azure. Very similarly with database discovery as well. We've had the database migration assistant around for a little while now that basically you can run on a SQL server or a cluster, and it'll give us some information about whether that database is ready to be migrated into a particular service in Azure, and it will also give us recommendations. So Microsoft have invested in those tools as well. So today I'm happy to kind of talk through that. As we're kind of talking about modernizing applications, I thought it'd be cool to pick up on that announcement around the ability to scan our estate for web apps and look at moving some of those web apps into the Azure platform, if that makes sense.
Yeah, to understand, I go to Azure Migration Service, um, and then I just provide the information there, and it just scans through it. All this is happening without an agent installed, and it is scanning through those web APIs, and then getting that information back and setting up the dependencies. What are the dependencies are available, and how I can migrate these things.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. I think one of the I wouldn't say it's an issue, but it can be an issue for some customers, is that before these announcements, we had, like I said, we've had agentless scanning in public preview for a little while now, probably a year or so from my memory, specifically around VMware clusters. Before that, we had to install agents on each VM or each physical server, which, look, can cause a little bit of a pain in the real world when you're dealing with customers with production servers that are in operation. When you speak to those customers and say, look, we need to install agents, it can raise a few eyebrows and it can be a little bit of a blocker. So Microsoft introduced that agentless scanning a little while back with VMware, but now I believe that's Hyper-V as well. And that's generally available now, is my belief from Build, in terms of we can now put an appliance into our cluster. We can target our VMware or Hyper-V clusters, and we don't need to install those agents. We can just do a scan across that cluster, and we can discover at a very detailed depth of information what's actually going on with our estate. So yeah, that was cool to see.
Oh, okay, perfect. And how does a person will know when we are ready to migrate? And is there a way to stop the migrations and reapply these migrations? And does it save the state if there is some issue in the migrations? How does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that was another announcement of today, the ability to pause. Beforehand, we would kind of synchronize a server, if you like. We would seed that server over to Azure. It would be there ready and waiting, till we wanted to complete that migration. And before we would complete that migration, and it would, do a delta replication of the last, the changes of that particular server, and it would make it live in Azure, and obviously make it not live in your on-prem or your private data center location. That's been announced now, that we can now actually pause, we can modify, we can schedule, we can time when we want that cutover of these servers to come into effect. Like I say, it's really building on that Migrate appliance and that Migrate service of old. It's building additional feature-rich services into it. And like I say, I've got a couple of slides to kind of walk through a few screenshots if you want to see what this looks like. I don't know if you want to put my screen.
Yeah, definitely. I'll just add you here.
So, I've just taken the liberty. I've not got a live demo as such. I've taken a few screenshots that I'll quickly flick through. But just to give you a bit of a sense, this is being set up in an Azure tenant now. We've got the Azure Migrate appliance. I'll get my little red laser pointer here. So we've got the Azure Migrate appliance sat, on premise somewhere, and you can see this is just a general discovery that's happened. We've discovered 591 servers, and we can break them down. We can click on these, and we can do what are called assessments. Now, when you do an assessment, all that is about is saying, right, okay, if I've got these 591 servers, maybe I want to do an assessment on a very specific area of those servers and say, target a dozen, 20, 30, whatever it is that we want to do. We can run an assessment, and it will give us the ability to kind of understand if that server is ready to be migrated. Now, these screenshots are actually taken on this new public preview announcement from Build on looking at the Azure app service. So what we've actually got is this assessment has scanned our environment, detected that we've got 591 servers, but it's also detected that we've got some servers that are running .NET or other web app services on it. So if we flick through, we can see if we click on that number 3 there, we've got app service in preview. We click on that number 3, we can see we've got 3 assessments that are being created to say, right, okay, we've recognized that there are some machines or servers that you've got web apps running on. So if we click on that bottom assessment there, and this is all, again, rich information that you can get from the portal, but what that's telling us now is that it's actually discovered a total of 314 web apps potentially that are running in your environment or our environment that we could use to scale and migrate directly into Azure. And you can see we've got a lot of yellow here. And what that denotes is the fact that, okay, we may have 314 web apps, but 306 of those, they're ready to migrate, but there are some conditions there. And we'll take a little look about what those conditions are in a second. But you can see that we've got 3 that are actually green. They're ready. They're good to go. We can actually start to migrate those immediately if we wanted to. We've also got a flag to say, look, you've got some services in there, they're just not going to be compatible. So therefore, there's going to be some more detailed work that we need to go in and take a look at there. But it also gives us kind of a monthly estimate if we were going to, it's very broad. It can be as broad or as targeted as you like. But in this case, it's very broad, saying this is a monthly estimate if we wanted to run all these web apps in Azure across 20 web app service plans. If we were to drill into that a little bit more, you can see the kind of information that it gives us is it'll say, right, okay, you've got 20 app service plans and we're going to run 16 web apps per service plan. And all of these items are configurable. You can choose the level of SKU that you're happy to run. You can choose the kind of the density of web apps that you're happy to run on an app service plan. But again, we can walk through this as a bit of an example. And we can click on, this Azure App Service Readiness tab in the portal, and it'll give us a little bit of information around, okay, so we've discovered all of these web apps or these applications on these servers, and you can start to see that it actually feeds back some really useful information, whether that's this is ready to go or we've got those apps that are ready, but there are a few conditions. And so if we click through those, we can see that we've clicked on one of these ready with conditions, and you can see it kind of gives us some information around, okay, on this particular service, you've got a binding to that web app of port 8135. Now, an app service plan can only target binding ports on 80 or 443. So therefore, if you are going to migrate this particular app, you're going to have to move your bindings. So it kind of helps us understand, look, if you want to move this, you're going to have to kind of retarget those client devices to look at 80 or 443. Because 8135 isn't going to work. So you can start to see we get some really good feedback. And again, clicking on one that isn't ready now. So we've got one blocking issue here. And you can see the kind of information that we get back. It's saying that Azure App Service is only going to support HTTP and HTTPS, but there were bindings found for unsupported protocols for this particular web app. So you can see there we've got net.msmq, which are, very, I don't know if you want to call them legacy protocols, but they're in use across applications, of course, across a number of estates. But the point being is that it gives us that information that we can then do something with in order to decide, do we want to go ahead and move that application with some changes or so on and so forth. Moving through once.
So
go on. Sorry, Vivek. Yeah, go on.
So I was just seeing, there was SKU as well. So does it recommend SKU as well?
It does.
When it recommends.
Yeah, absolutely. And all of this is configurable. When you set up an assessment, you can decide your boundaries and restrictions and the kind of the density, how many apps do you want to run on a particular app service plan. There's lots of configuration that you can do to kind of suit your own circumstances. But absolutely, one of the recommendations would be, based on the number of apps that you've got running, this is the SKU that they would recommend potentially. You can change all that as well. So you can take a look at that, are the costs too high, for your particular use of that application? Do you want to bring it down a bit because that application maybe isn't being utilized, heavily, or there's not a massive amount of concurrent users. So there are lots of contributing factors and variables that could play into your decision then to change that. But the service will absolutely give you some recommendations that you can take forward with.
Fantastic. I mean, I'm super thrilled to see this. You just add things to it, and you can make sure that it already have app service readiness is available, and it's kind of an enterprise completely moving into cloud, right? So that's interesting to see.
I mean, it's meant to kind of abstract away from a lot of the complexities. That you'd appreciate moving a web service may seem like a daunting activity, and what Microsoft have done with this assessment service is try to make it easy, make it as easy as possible. Don't get me wrong, there are still elements that you're going to have to go in and understand at a very deep technical level to whether that's going to work for you and your organization. But at least you've got a good starting point. And if you have got applications that are absolutely ready and can be moved directly into app service, then great. This tool is really like a one-stop shop that will take you on that journey. So if we click ahead quickly, you can see that we've chosen now, we've done our assessment, maybe we're ready to replicate some services up. So we can, through the portal again, under our Azure Migrate, we can click on replicate, and we get the option then to say, right, what are we looking to replicate? And we would select our ASP.NET Web Apps potentially. And then we've got the option to say, right, where do we want to replicate them to? Do we want to use that native web app service? We've got the ability to use app service containers, so run a container in an app service. Or you can see there, we've got the ability to kind of look at migrating these directly into a Kubernetes cluster, if that's what, or AKS, apologies. So the managed Kubernetes service from Azure. So in this example, we're going to pick the native service, which is the app service plan that has been around for a long time now with Azure. And then we're kind of given, again, a more point and click options that we can say, okay, these are all our web app services that we've discovered. We can filter them down to say, okay, I only want to see the app services that, we're good to go. They're green. They will migrate. And you can see, if you remember, we had 3. There's the 3 there at the top of the site. You can see they're nothing straight, nothing too complicated in this example. We've got a default website, a simple net site, and a cool site. But we can walk through this wizard now, and we can say, okay, so I've got those web apps. I want to select those. I want to, only select the apps that will migrate, and I want to migrate them to a particular app service plan. So again, you can either pre-configure all your app service plans. You can have this wizard create them for you. There's lots of scope there. So if we quickly walk through, again, this is where we could come and change our SKU of our app service plan if that's what we wanted to do. We could change all of that there and then. And as we walk through, again, like any wizard, we've got effectively, we can download this information as a CSV, but we're saying this is the imported web app name. This is the target web app name from our on-premise or private data center. This is where it's going to go to, very simply. And that's about it. We click go, and it will go and do all of that for us. Now, this will take a little while to create the relevant resources and package up and zip up that website and all the artifacts that go with that and move that up to the app service plan. But once that's done, you can go in and check the jobs. We'll have lots of nice green ticks, which is what hopefully you want to see. And there we go. The next thing you see is that we've got our default website up and running in Azure. We can go and click on that URL, and we can note that it's a very straightforward default website showing that IIS page. But in a nutshell, Vivek, that's kind of one of the preview announcements that has come out of Build, which is cool to see. And there's very similar things with Database Migration Assistant going on there. So it's great to see some of these announcements.
Yeah, so when I was seeing the screenshot, moving to Azure Kubernetes Service is one of the announcement, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the assessment is available for database as well?
Yeah, so with database, you've got this tool called DMA, Database Migration Assistant, that you would run that on a SQL server or a SQL, target a SQL cluster. You give it some credentials so that it can log on and do the assessment, and it will give you a lot of depth, very similarly to the appliance that's scanning servers there, but it'll give you a little bit more SQL targeted database. And again, Microsoft have enhanced those capabilities now from Build with more feature-rich possibilities. Effectively, what Microsoft have announced is that when you ran DMA, you will be given recommendations as to whether this particular database was ready to be able to be moved to, an Azure SQL PaaS database, or maybe a managed service PaaS, so a managed instance. What Microsoft have done now is given that the ability to recommend SQL running on an IaaS VM as well within Azure. So they're expanding the recommendations and the options that are available to us to migrate some of those data services.
Perfect. And there are a couple of questions, John, from the audience. So I'll just
Sure.
push that questions to you. And let's see this. Let's take this from Cloud Therapist. So the question is, what do I need to do to integrate the Azure migration appliance into my corporate LAN?
Sure. So first thing, jump into your Azure portal, start in the Azure portal, type in Azure Migrate up in the top search bar, and you will find the ability to create an Azure Migrate project, which is basically a log analytics workspace behind the scenes. From there, you can download the image. So whether you're running Hyper-V or VMware, make your selection. You'll be able to download that image and spin that up in your cluster, in your hypervisor of choice cluster, and get it on the network in the same way that you've got your corporate, production servers in your cluster. You spin that appliance up on that cluster. You run through a very easy to follow wizard where you effectively, because you're running it on VMware Hyper-V, you've got it on the network. You're giving it some credentials, basically to access the services within those clusters and maybe additional credentials for whatever it is you might be scanning. And there you've integrated it. Part of that integration is when you go through the wizard, you're basically telling the appliance, go and speak to this Azure Migrate project that is in my Azure subscription. So anything that appliance then does scan, it will feed all of the data back straight into that log analytics workspace, which is basically powering all of, if I flick back through, it's powering everything that you see here, basically. So this is what you would see. All of this would start to get populated within your Azure tenant. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yes, I think that's pretty much answers the question. And there are a couple of more questions coming in. So let's take that. So this is basically how much time would it take to move a web-based application to app service from a migration process? And the follow-up question there is, what are those changes you need to make? I mean, if I'm doing those changes, what are those specific areas, or is there any kind of best practices which you would recommend?
Well, yeah, yes and no. I think it's one of those things where the more complicated that web app is, obviously the more consideration you need to give to the tier. So is the web forms web app, is that part of a multi-tiered application? Does it have some middleware? Does it have a back-end database? You've got to put that holistically into consideration. If it's a very simple single server web app that is doing some, it's doing the logic and it's got its own, whatever that app is doing, then great. It should be relatively simple. I mean, look, you can use this scanning service to actually give you some of that detail for your very specific requirement. But I think to actually move a very simple, straightforward .NET application up to Azure is relatively straightforward. Obviously, the considerations being is what is that web application talking to on the back end? So if you've got any databases, where are they going to reside? Because are you going to migrate those at the same time? Are you going to leave them on-prem? Have you got your networking? All of those kind of considerations. I mean, the follow-up question, Vivek, with changing over to .NET at a later date, could you ask that one again? Sorry, I think I missed that question. How much work was involved, was it?
Yes, it's basically how much work is involved if you're looking at to move a .NET 6 app.
Yeah, I mean, so by default, obviously, app service plans will support a number of different architectures in terms of languages as well. So, if it's a case that you are looking to change that at a later date, it would be a case of, however you want to do that change. If it's a massive change in your application, you might want to maybe move that to a separate app service plan that is running, based on the condition and the language and services that you need for that particular web app. So there will be some work involved in there. But again, if you understand specifically what it is that you're trying to do, it's all achievable. I wouldn't suppose that you'd try and change or modify an app service plan once it's in production. You might want to keep that up and running and maybe use another app service plan to host the new version of your site, something along those lines.
There's a bunch of questions coming in. So if I pre-select all my choices, could Azure Migrate automate the entire process of migration for me?
Look, we'd like to think that we could automate everything in one process. I think that's the utopia. I think in reality, and gone through a number of these migrations with other customers, we're not quite at that utopian place where we can just click a few buttons and walk away. There's still a lot of, manual intervention in terms of making sure that you understand, like I say, mainly around the dependencies. As much as Azure Migrate will tell us what the dependencies are, Azure Migrate isn't going to go and update DNS records. It's not going to go and change firewall rules or make sure your routing is properly in place. These are all things that you're going to need to do beforehand to make sure that when we do get to the place that we can click a button or maybe automate that failover of that migration, schedule it at a later time, everything else is in place. So there's a lot of preparation work that needs to go around it to begin. And of course, some of the reasoning behind why you're looking to migrate in the first place. You know, if you're looking to migrate because, I don't know, maybe you've got an app that's on-prem at the moment that you're struggling to scale and it's being, you know, overloaded at certain peak times during the day. Well, of course, during that migration, you're going to want to look at maybe some of the elastic scale or the scalability options that you've got. Again, all of these things, don't get me wrong, you could sit down and automate them, but I think generally speaking, what I see is when we start to move some of these applications, there are a lot of decisions that need to be made and a relatively decent amount of understanding of what that app is doing, what end users it's servicing, what it's talking to on the back end. So by the time you try to automate all of that, you can probably guarantee one of those variables would have changed. So you kind of have to step in anyway. So hopefully that makes a bit of sense.
Yes, I mean, and that's how, that's how you should make the automation to it, right? We rightly put, right? We think we can automate everything, so that's the usual developer mindset, right? Otherwise, we need to make sure that there are a couple of things which we cannot automate. We have to go and check and verify and everything. We need to make sure that it's up and running. And there's one more question. This is the last question. Which is how service to service calls should be designed from a specifically logging strategy for the correlation ID and from a debugging perspective for APIs.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're delving into the region here of being very specific, I think, of an application. But of course, we've got App Insights that at the end of the day, we've got App Insights that we can use to kind of understand our applications and, you know, bring out those insights and kind of service them in an Azure platform, in a log analytics workspace again, collect all our app metrics, and we can surface those things. Hopefully, that's what you're asking. How can we leverage the Azure platform to kind of pull out our application logs? They can all be centrally stored and housed, whether they're running in an app service plan or they're running on an IaaS VM, and they can kind of be analyzed and queried right across the estate with, you know, having a centralized log analytics workspace to capture all of these logs. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yes, and before we go to Korey, right, I have last question to you, John. You know, how does the gRPC support for Azure App Service changes the game?
Yeah, well, do you know what? I've not had a chance to look at that announcement now, but I know the Google RPC has been announced. I don't know. Have you got any insights on that one, Vivek, at the moment?
No,
yeah,
not yet.
I've not.
So
I've not had a chance to
I'm just thinking it will. I'm just thinking it will improvise it would build the performance of the application, you know, improvise the performance and app connections as well. If you have APIs and you built APIs on app service, and if you're connecting to those APIs, maybe the performance would improve because of the gRPC support.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I say, I've just not had a chance to actually do anything with it, sit down and kind of digest and understand what those benefits are. But I did see the announcement at a very high level. But yeah, it's definitely one I want to go and have a little bit of a read on.
Fantastic. So thanks, John, for explaining all of these things and taking the questions as well. So I'll just move on to Korey. Hi, Korey.
Hello.
Yep. So how was your weekend?
It was a good weekend. It was a long weekend here in Sweden. It was our National Day yesterday. So actually, last year I became a Swedish citizen, and this year I was able to attend a ceremony that they have in every kind of major city in Sweden, where they welcome all the new citizens. So it was a great weekend, actually.
Fantastic. So this is your first build, or you have been following build before?
It is my first build. Yeah, definitely.
So what are those exciting announcements for you? Like which announcement excited you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm a big of a speech nerd, so I always watch the keynote and like soak it in, just the excitement, the marketing, the videos, and all that. So I thought that Satya's keynote was amazing. But I am a major lover of all things AI, so I'm going to share the same feelings John had around some of the open AI stuff. I saw a great demo where using Codex, essentially you could like pair with a Minecraft friend or a Minecraft pal, basically, and they were using basically API service that would allow them to know what like kind of potions and formulas and things like that you can make in game. And they had like a character that was just basically your partner. You would ask them questions, and they were be able to tell you about the game or what to do in the game. So I thought that was super amazing, and it's just so many use cases that are out there for this type of service with Codex. So I'm super excited to see what more and more stuff that people can build.
Fantastic. So, since you are talking about the data, right, and AI data and stuff, so I wanted to know more about Azure Data Studio, which is there, and can you just give more details to it, because I'm not worked on that as well.
Yeah, definitely. So Azure Data Studio, as far as the build releases, we actually have available now, being able to use in preview is the MongoDB API. So you can actually manage your databases within the Azure Data Studio. And Azure Data Studio is I would say, kind of a client tool or a visual tool on knowing exactly what your collections look like, managing those, building the database within them. So it just really makes a nice streamlined kind of experience for both viewing and managing your databases. We're specifically talking about Cosmos DB.
Yeah, I mean, I read the announcement where it has the capability of burst scenarios has been added to it, and how exactly it will help the customer to scale their applications and distribute it as well from a Cosmos DB perspective, which is again MongoDB support, which has been provided. Do you have any demo for that, or anything you want to show us?
Yeah, definitely. Would love to talk also about what you just mentioned around the burst capacity. There's a new feature within there because one of the things with Cosmos DB and what we're trying to really design for, and I'm not sure if it's the marketing before the product or the product before the marketing. I don't know which comes first, but that is planet-size scaling, which is quite fitting for the name of the product. And we're really trying to deliver a scalable product for certain use cases where maybe if you're working in IoT, for example, and you have a large amount of activity in huge sort of burst. Let's say you're censoring weather or traffic, and you get all this data that needs to be either written or you're read by the database. Cosmos DB is really kind of aiming to those sorts of use cases, as well as things like gaming. We've seen where maybe you have a new update to your game, and gamers, like most other people, don't like to wait, so they need to have the sort of millisecond performance. Cosmos DB adds that flexibility. And one of the bigger announcements is working with Azure Data Studio, as you mentioned. So I can do a little quick demo of what that looks like. If you can go ahead.
I can add that if you just share it.
Yeah. Cool. So I'm team dark mode, so hopefully everyone can see this on their side. So as you are probably aware of, if you're making,
if you can just zoom in a little bit. Yep.
Let's see. So you have this. We have a Cosmos DB set up here. And in order to get in actually to the Azure Data Studio, we've made it extremely easy by just connecting with ADS. So you can see that button here. And I have a Cosmos DB from my MongoDB account. And if you haven't have it downloaded, you can go ahead and download it directly here, or we can connect that directly to the Azure Data Studio once you have downloaded it and set that up. So making it really easy for that, as far as like the setup and copying, pasting all the credentials and details. You don't need to really do that now. You can just connect that to your setup, and then it will be pre-populated. If we go into the Data Studio and what that looks like.
Oh, I think we lost your screen.
I think so. So now you can
You're
see
back.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if I can zoom in on that. Let's see.
No, that's fine. I think it's
yeah.
visible.
Okay. Well, so this is the Azure Data Studio, and if you have used VS Code before, it probably looks familiar to you, because this is actually based on a fork of VS Code. So again, it gets that nice familiar feeling in terms of some of the use of what you need can do and manage in your database. And once you're actually here for the data, once you've downloaded the Data Studio and you've connected it to your account, just make sure that that's actually an additional extension for the MongoDB API. So you just need to go in to your extensions, install it, and then you have it all set up. But I have a database here for my setup, so I can go in and I can actually see the specific collections that I have. Or if I can just click on one of these, I can easily go in and actually make a new database. If I wanted to, I can actually open the Mongo shell, so I can actually make the calls directly into the database for opening the terminal. And then, yeah, so if I open this database, I can see the collection overview. So if you have multiple collections, and what's really nice, I think, when you're getting started with Cosmos DB, you might not have the data available. You just want to get kind of playing around with it. You can import sample data directly into a collection by just clicking on this. And we can have this sort of persons collection already created. And it has some things where you can play around with that, test some things out. And again, once I click on this collection, the terminal will open, which has all of the details of the database.
Got it. So this looks very similar to Visual Studio Code. So this is not an extension, but it is a separate installation, right?
Yeah, it's a separate installation. So you can install it either via the documentation page or directly in your Azure setup.
Got it. I think this is amazing. So you can go here and update the data here and connect it to the Azure Cosmos DB, and then use it within your application.
Yep. So this is perfect for management. And speaking of management, we've done a few other updates for Cosmos DB around role-based account management. So you can come in and if you want to, instead of having to set up you set up a new user and you want to set up their permissions, and doing that by a per user basis is really annoying and kind of slow. So now within MongoDB, you can create roles where you can assign each new individual a separate role, or let's say a team a role, and have specific permissions to the database there. So saving tons of time. And then another thing we've done is around burst capacity. So managing the actual unused provisions that you may have set up for your Cosmos DB database. And you can instead of getting throttled once you hit your sort of provision limit, we actually collect 5 minutes of idle time and add that to basically like an account essentially. And you can use those for your new request units.
Got it. So this is pretty interesting update here because there was very difficult for us to run the burst scenarios, right? I mean, that was pretty much I was hearing from the customer side, and especially the ones which is updated to, what is the burst number which they have been updated? It's for 1 TB.
Yeah. So for our capacity, we've for serverless setups, we have upgraded from 50 gigabytes to 1 terabyte.
Okay.
And then for the actual burst capacities itself, for when you're having request units come in, that's up to sort of 3,000 request units. And you can think of request units as basically the amount of kind of cost it takes to compute your request. So like a basic read is one request unit, but other operations could be different values. So it's a great way to, again, provide some scalability and flexibility when you're, again, really starting out, but also provisioning correctly can be tricky at times.
Fantastic, fantastic. So, I mean, I missed actually Bill because I was on vacation. I just came
Oh,
back and I went through the whole videos. I saw Satya's announcement like twice, thrice, because I don't want to miss any of those announcements which came in. And a couple of announcements which I really enjoyed was the draft. For Kubernetes, if you want to build something else. And yesterday I did the demo of that as well in the other show, unpacking show, and .NET Maui as well. It's generally available now. People who are building apps, one single code compiled for rest of the platforms, and how a dev box came into picture. And yesterday I did talk about the story of code and code spaces, how GitHub actually were able to reduce from 45 minutes plus bootstrapping of a developer environment to 10 seconds, using code spaces. Interesting blog post yesterday I shared as well. And and I did mention that I'm going to talk about the AI ops today because I am from DevOps background. I enjoyed that specific announcement because it reduces a lot of friction. So I just want to show uh, a simple demo. And so basically this is where simple eShop, basically, which has been set up. There is an eShop which is running as of now, but unfortunately there is some issue with the code. So the eShop is not up, but the application inside and everything is running now. So I've set it up. And when you go into this application inside, the announcement was around the how Azure, in application inside, how uh, AI ops has been introduced. And specifically, if you see here, intelligent view, which is right now, it is not on, it is off basically. And you can see there is low, medium, and a high. uh, if you see this number of calls it is making and number of issues it is showing, it's kind of high, right? And in a real time scenario, you have bunch of services talking to each other, and there is so many requests which is coming into the application. And there is a lot of calls which is coming in, and for debugging it is really difficult. And that's the main reason why this intelligent view has been set up. And if you see this, even if I go to the application, it's not running now, so it's let's not worry about the application. So if I go and hit it, so this number of calls increases. It goes around 600 calls now. So if I just refresh it, you see it goes around 648 calls. So it just makes it difficult for us to debug, right? As a DevOps engineer or as a developer, if you go back and see this, where is the performance bottleneck, it's very difficult to see. So the reason why intelligent view came in, when if I on this, you can see the reduced number of calls and where the block is as well. So if you see, there's a couple of things, and if I click on this, you can easily go and pick some of the things. Oops, my screen is quite a challenge. Okay, so there is investigation failure and other things where you can obviously see all of these and then make your call. But the interesting thing to note here is, let me go back to this, the introduction of the low, medium, and high. So basically, you can reduce the quality of, you can go with low. It will show all the performance bottlenecks, and it gives you all the information with respect to the issues which has been captured. And if it is quality is high, it only captures the failures, and that's what been introduced in the AI ops on top of this smart maps. Basically, it is called as smart maps now, and you look at like an application maps, but it has become smarter with the intelligence view which has been added on top of this. There's something, a small demo which I just wanted to show before we all summarize what was discussed today. So John, any final thoughts?
Well, not final thoughts as such, but it's just really exciting time to kind of be working in tech. I think at the moment it's just we've been used to getting our learning we need to stay on top of our learning on an hourly daily basis at the moment. So it's really cool to see all these advancements in tech, and it screams out that we're kind of all here to kind of try and innovate and do some great stuff with this. But no, I think we probably just scrape the surface of the announcements that Build Vivek in this session today. But go and check out the book of news, because I mean it gives us some great links to if you just do a quick search for Microsoft Build Book of News, it'll give all the announcements there. It'll take us off into various blog articles and further reading if that's what we want to look at. But no, it's been a great event.
How about you, Korey?
Yeah, same ideas. I think it's a super exciting time. A lot of these things that we announced at Build are really going to be enablers for people to build things that they haven't ever at the scale that they haven't ever been before. And fortunately for us, we've got the easy job. We do the demos and point and click and show. But I really would like to give a lot of appreciation and props to the teams behind all of these lovely products, both from actually doing the development and delivering on these things, but also making it in an easy way for us to do sort of these presentations and get out to the community, because that's another level, obviously knowing the value and delivering on it. So yeah, it was a really great event.
I definitely agree, and we are just getting started. We're just getting started because these are all something really new things which has come in. Like yesterday, I was trying Draft, and there were so many things in Draft as well. There are so many new improvements are coming in, and definitely, as you said, John, this is a very interesting time to be in the tech, and there is from an AI perspective, from cloud native perspective, from a codex perspective as well. Like AI programmer, buddy programmer who's sitting with you from an AI perspective, and all of these things coming together is going to be an interesting thing for next coming year. And for audience, if you have any questions, do post. We'll be here for 2 more minutes. We can obviously take those questions. And John did mention about Book of News, so I'm posting the link of Book of News here. You can just pick the book. There's bunch of announcements there, as he mentioned, over 50 announcements. So we are just covering a bit piece of it, right? So you can definitely go back and scan through it, understand why it was announced, and there are amazing links as well. You can learn more in the Book of News as well. So if you click on learn more, and you'll get into the news as well, where there is a detailed explanation of each of these services which has been announced. We are here for 2 more minutes. If you have any questions, just post those questions. Else, we can all take a break. And thank you, Korey, and thank you, John, for being here. And it was amazing to learn so many things, specifically Azure migration. I've never used that service, so interesting to see how powerful it is. And maybe I should go back now and give it a try. And yeah, Azure Data Studio as well. I've used Cosmos DB, but yeah, with MongoDB with Linux is something which I will also try, Korey.
You got to. It's the future.
Cool. Great. So thank you again for being here.
My pleasure. It's been good fun. Thanks for having me on.
Likewise.